And I'm gonna tweet it so to see it. Cool. I retweeted it. Cool. We good? Good? Cool. Is anybody in yet? 2 people? Cool. Alright guys, see you with Prima Coffee. Today we're going to talk about Nitro coffee. So cool, right? It's kind of a big thing right now. Everybody's doing it with like cold brew and stuff. It's actually really easy and really approachable. And we've been playing it with here for like 2 weeks-ish now, maybe a little bit longer than that, because we're starting to get some Nitro kits ready to list up on the website. So pretty soon we'll have full kits available for you guys to buy, you know, if you're a cafe, or even if you want to do it at home. It's really not that expensive for some of the smaller starter kits. But we want to show you what we've been doing, because we are not really going the same sort of typical cold brew on Nitro road. Cold brew on Nitro is it's a pretty nice drink. You know, it's got a good heavy body, good sweetness. It's obviously cold, and then the Nitro gives this nice kind of frothy head, really sort of creamy finish to it. But some of us here at Prima aren't the biggest fans of cold brew, myself included. I prefer my cold coffee to be made from hot coffee, so I like crash cooled hot coffee because it preserves the acidity. You still get some of the sweetness. It's a little bit lower body, but you also preserve a lot of the aromas as well. So that's how I typically like my cold coffee, and we were kind of thinking, well, why don't we try that on Nitro? So we have it set up here, but I kind of wanted to show you just sort of the whole setup first before we get into this. Obviously we have our little kegerator here. It's hooked up just, you know, with a pretty traditional sort of like beer faucet. We have the stout faucet on top, and this is kind of the unique part along with the Nitro, because there's a little restrictor plate in here, just a little piece of metal. It's got smaller holes, perforations in it, that cause, once the gas comes out of solution, it causes these little tiny bubbles to form out of the bigger bubbles that might have kind of cropped up. So inside we've got pretty simple setup. It's just a small, this is a 3-gallon keg and a small nitrogen bottle with a regulator on it. So really that's all you need is these 2 guys, a kegerator, some lines, and of course some coffee. So you know, with that in mind, obviously it's pretty easy. You just get your nitrogen bottle filled up. You can't actually ship a full nitrogen bottle in the US, so you would receive an empty bottle or go to your local gas supply shop like a Welder's Supply or Airgas or something like that. You can get a bottle from them, or you can get an empty bottle from us, get it filled up with nitrogen. It's like 15-20 bucks. Get your keg, put your coffee in it, pressurize it with nitrogen, get it all hooked up in there. Usually the best idea is to kind of let it condition for either a few hours or overnight, just so that nitrogen dissolves a little bit more, and then you're good to serve. But for us, we're not doing cold brew again, so we have another little setup right over here. So this of course is a Curtis batch brewer. I've got about a gallon of coffee in here right now, and you'll notice my dispenser is hooked up to this whole kind of weird little setup here. It's just a giant bucket of ice water. It's about a 4 or 5 gallon bucket. I've got a nice big piece of PVC tubing hooked up to a big long copper tube. It's about 20 feet long, I think. Could be longer. You know, given how much it cools down, it probably should be a little bit longer, like maybe 30 feet. But obviously, once it's coiled up, it can be compressed into this, you know, 18-inch sort of height. So our hot coffee runs out of the dispenser directly into this tube full of ice water. Cools down as it's going down there. We've got another little PVC tube down here, and we actually have a little bit of a valve on the end, and that's just it's just a little ball valve. It's actually from a cold brew tower, but that's just to restrict the flow through the bottom tube, just to slow everything down so it has a little bit more dwell time up here. If we had a longer tube, that probably wouldn't even be necessary. And then we just drop it right into this 3-gallon keg. So this is what's called a Cornelius keg. It's pretty common in home brewing. Basically, it's easier to fill from the top. You know, if you have your own mash that you just made at home, and you don't have all these like fancy lines and fittings and pumps and everything, and you just need basically to pour from a bucket into a keg. That's what a corny keg is good for. But this is a 3-gallon capacity, so it's going to be only about a third full of my coffee. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on. And really, it's as easy as this. I just throw the spigot open, and gravity does the rest. My hot coffee again is going to run down through this tube, through the coil, and as you can see, it's going to come out. It's not super cold, it's about 60 degrees, 50 to 60 degrees we found. And again, you know, we could probably work out the kinks there and give it a longer coil or copper coil for more contact with this ice water, more thermal exchange. So as it, you know, follows that path and, you know, it takes a nice long ride down the tube, it'll get even colder. The target serving temperature we have is about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, a little bit above freezing, but a nice, pleasant, cool temperature. But this whole, like, you know, 50 to 60 degrees is certainly okay, because once we take the keg, we cap it up, and we fill it up with nitrogen, we just throw it directly in the fridge. That nitrogen limits the contact with oxygen, so there's still some oxidation going on, but it is lessened by the fact that basically the entire airspace above the coffee is now filled with pure nitrogen, or, you know, as close to pure as we can get by forcing out the extra air up top. Actually, that reminds me, there's a good point. The shelf life of this coffee is not quite as long as cold brew is. If you've ever had, you know, a hot coffee that's sitting out for, you know, well, a fresh hot coffee versus one that's been sitting out for 3 or 4 hours, you'll notice there's a pretty big difference. The coffee gets a little bit more bitter. It's actually sometimes going to taste a little more acidic even. It tends to lose its aromas, its aromatic qualities, so it tastes a little bit flatter generally. Cold brew doesn't quite have that same problem, I think because it's kind of started its life having sat out for a while. So it starts out tasting like it's, you know, kind of been sitting around for a little bit. But then after that, you know, there isn't a huge diminishment in the flavor quality over its lifetime. You know, after 5 to 7 days, yeah, it starts to taste a little flatter, maybe a little metallic, but those first 2 or 3 days, it doesn't really taste any different at all. Whereas with this method, unfortunately, those first couple of days, and I'm just tipping my server to kind of get the last remaining bit out of here. Unfortunately with this method, because it starts its life as a hot coffee and it's crash cooled, it has basically, it's got more in common with that hot coffee and how its flavor changes over its lifetime. So you can get about 2, maybe 3 days out of this, but it's really going to be best on that first day after kegging. You'll notice, you know, if you're drinking it over those first couple of days, you'll notice a pretty obvious diminishment in flavor. I'm not even gonna worry about that last little bit. We'll just close the valve, tuck it away. Obviously that was a pretty quick cooling process. So now I've got not quite a gallon of coffee here in my keg. It feels about a little cooler than room temperature right now, but I'm gonna take that and seal it up. So these corny kegs have kind of an elliptical top. You just drop it right in, twist it. I'm gonna line the seal up here. And then you just snap that handle down and that pulls the lid up and keeps the seal in place. So the next step, of course, is to pressurize this with nitrogen. This is also really easy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bottle out here, close up all my valves, disconnect it. Now these use what are called ball lock fittings. They're very, very easy to use. You don't need any screws or any other hardware or equipment. They just have this little collar here that is spring-loaded and pushes these ball bearings on that lock onto the fitting here. So I'm actually going to hook this up. There is an in and an out fitting on the keg. The in fitting has basically like a 1-inch tube. It stops right in there. That's what you normally push your gas in. The out fitting has a long tube that goes all the way to the bottom of the keg, and that's basically so, you know, the air pressure pushes down on the liquid, and that forces the liquid back up through this tube from the bottom. But I'm actually going to charge this keg through the out tube because that's going to allow my nitrogen to bubble down through the liquid right away. I'm going to open up my valve, and I'm charging this to about 40 psi. Normal service temperature or service pressure is going to be somewhere between 20 and 40 psi. Just kind of depending on the body of your coffee. For the thinner body of the coffee that we're doing, it benefits from a little bit higher pressure because it gets a little bit better head once you're dispensing it. Now, I'm going to shut this valve off because I can hear it's just barely bubbling now. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up the release valve, so this is going to be loud. And I'm going to repressurize. Now that again is to try and displace as much air in here with pure nitrogen. And just fill up the keg as much as possible with nitrogen and as little oxygen as possible to prevent oxidation while it's sitting and conditioning for the next couple of days. I can hear it, the bubbling is tapering off, so I'm going to close that up again. I'm going to disconnect my fitting. I'm just going to give this little guy a little bit of a swirl. And that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to let this sit in my fridge over the weekend to condition. And on Monday it'll be good to dispense. Now, thankfully we've got enough room for like 2 kegs and 2 bottles in here. But I'm going to show you what it's like to actually kind of dispense this and serve some drinks to people. So I'll take my ball lock, I'll snap it back on. So there goes my thermometer. Squeeze this guy in here. One thing, I want to make sure my regulator doesn't get hit or anything, so I'm going to play with this a second. It's like a game of Jenga. Okay. Make sure that's on, open up that valve. Fridge is closed. So now we're all set up. I have a keg of previously made coffee that's all ready to go. You do need to have the nitrogen hooked up to actually what beer people call push or dispense the keg that's currently in operation. But the nitrogen bottle that we have is 22 cubic foot, I think, I mean, we haven't had to refill it in 2 weeks, and we've done a lot of this. So you can get quite a lot of use out of it. If you're using a larger cylinder, obviously you get more gas and you get more use out of it. But I don't know, let's take a look at our coffee here. So it looks pretty pale, and that's because everything in here is all nitrogen bubbles. And if you get a close-up shot, you can see how it's doing that sort of Guinness effect where the foam is settling in the cup. And you can see the foam layers starting to form here. It's really beautiful to look at. Again, so with like cold brew, you have a little bit heavier body than this does. Usually you get a little bit more foam. Like I said, we've turned up the pressure to sort of accommodate that, but it won't be quite the same. What it is though, you know, if you don't compare it directly to cold brew, it is still a very delicious and unique sort of experience with this nitrogen cold coffee. And again, we like the flavor better typically of a crash cooled hot coffee. You know, that all comes down to preferences, of course, but you know, the nitrogen adds the same sort of effect here as it would with the cold brew, where you get that extra bit of mouthfeel, you get this nice, beautiful presentation, and the flavor is still all there. It's great. It's, you know, it's nicely acidic, well balanced, just as tasty as any of your other kind of batch brew drip coffees. Really great. Love that head on there. It's such a unique and great thing. You know, you got summer coming up. It's going to be so refreshing to serve something like this. Anyway, so that is pretty much our presentation here. You know, we've got, like I said, it's a pretty simple setup. It might seem a little bit kind of out there, but you know, beer people have been doing this for forever, and now coffee people are catching on that it can actually add something really interesting to your coffee service. And the equipment is dead simple. It's widely available. You know, we're really excited to kind of get this out there and get more people interested. But we're going to be doing this at our SCAA booth, booth 1728. We're pretty close to the USBC arena, so if you're going to join us in Atlanta, come on by. We'll have this every single day. We've got 2 kegs, and our batch brewer does a 1.5 gallons per batch, so we should have about 3 gallons of this per day. We will try and stagger it out so we don't run out first thing in the morning every day. And we got a whole bunch of like guest baristas and other coffees and things that we want to serve as well. So, you know, where it's not going to be a one-note show here, but if you're going to be in Atlanta, feel free to come by our booth, come join us, try out the Nitro flash chilled coffee. Unfortunately, our method doesn't really have a, you know, Nitro cold brew sounds really cool and it rolls right off the tongue. Nitro batch brew flash chilled, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but still very tasty nonetheless. But yeah, really very easy setup. You just need your nitrogen bottle, your keg, lines, a refrigerator. You don't even need a kegerator. You can install a refrigerator with kegs and run lines in your bar and install a faucet and a tower pretty much wherever you want. You can insulate that stuff so everything stays cold. Pretty much like what a bar would do. You know, you can do the same thing for your coffee on draft. You can use, if you don't want to use a stout faucet, you can use like just a normal beer faucet, which won't aerate it quite as much. You might still get some bubbles and a little tiny bit of head, or you can push a slightly lower pressure and serve basically you can use nitrogen, but you can basically serve like a non-foamed coffee if you are just more interested in having an economical way to serve a large amount of batch brew on draft or something like that, or cold brew even. Anyway, any questions at all, or? All right, if we don't really have any questions, then we can kind of wrap this up. We're going to post this video to our YouTube channel. Obviously, we're always available to answer questions and stuff on Instagram, Twitter, what have you. Send them our way on our website. We're going to have a Nitro blog and a more detailed video of how to set all this up coming your way soon. And then, yeah, again, you know, if you're going to be in Atlanta at SCA, come see us, come say hi. We'll show you the whole thing. We're going to have a bigger kegerator, more commercial style model. And yeah, we'll be happy to show it off and tell you all about it. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you around.